I'm Jerry Craig with the Vet Voice, and I'm proud to announce our announcement of the endorsement of Caroline Kane, who's running for US Congress in Texas' 7th Congressional District. So, Ms. Kane, thank you for coming on the show. Speak to the audience and your voters a little bit about your race, what got you into this race, and what you're going to do once you're elected.
Okay, well, hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm Caroline Kane. I am a local area businesswoman. I have been in property management for the last 30 some odd years, believe it or not. Don't pull out your calculator. I started my own company 12 years ago. It's a small business, and am, a Houstonian by nature. I've been here for 40 years now. So I attended Houston ISD, graduated from Westbury High School, attended Bel Air High School in the 10th grade, which is in the district. And just found myself in the middle of COVID with a lot of crazy things coming down the pike at us, including locking down our businesses. It turns out I was an essential business, but so many were not, including local restaurants, people that I knew and liked, and I worried about them. I worried about their employees and thought, well, where is our Constitution? And the next thing you know, we have mask mandates and our cities are burning down and nobody seems to be doing anything about it. And I went to Facebook to see if anybody else was feeling the same way that I was, because I couldn't find my constitutional protections anywhere. We have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They closed our houses of worship. Is that not an essential form, of business that is? We have a First Amendment protection that guarantees our religious freedom, and we couldn't even attend our churches and synagogues. So there was a very noticeable silence on Facebook. These people were not concerned that this was any kind of worry at all for them. And so I went over to Twitter and I found my people, because they were up in arms. They said, this is unconstitutional. Here is the protection, and where is our Constitution? And, it took me down a very deep kind of rabbit hole, that there is something called the Great Reset. And, I learned about that this is a globalist takeover, really not of just the United States, but of the world. And it is the middle class of the United States that is staying in the way, standing in the gap for the rest of the world. If America falls, so goes the rest of the world. And it was a huge burden for me. I had been what I thought was a good conservative for a very long time. I paid my taxes. I was a good boss and a good wife and a good mom. And I thought, what else can I do? So I started donating to different campaigns saying, okay, this person can turn the country around. This person can turn the country around. Then 2020 was stolen. Yes, I'm an election denier. And so I started to work elections thinking, you're not going to steal my election. And, did what I could to try and turn things around. And somebody came to me and emailed me and said, do you want to run for office? And so I talked to my husband. I prayed on it. I wound up talking to that campaign consultant for the next couple of months while we figured things out, whether this is something I really wanted to do. Prayed over it. My husband was all right with it. And so here we are. It's a little more than a year later, and I'm enjoying this. It's a lot more difficult than I ever thought it was going to be. It's a mean business. It's like being in high school again. It's very cliquey. The parties are very divided. So even the Democrat Party is divided. The Republican Party is divided. Nobody can seem to come together on either side of the aisle. And so we just keep trudging through because, our kids and our grandkids are worth it. And that's the only reason I'm doing this. I've led a good life.
You look just under the surface and you start looking into how broken it is. It's revealing of how broken the system is and how volatile our system is. And it needs people like you to step up and to take charge and to jump into office. And what are the most important things to the people in your district?
I'm going to say the border, the economy, and crime. The border is a travesty. It's a human rights disaster. It is a national security crisis and a humanitarian crisis, such that I had never seen in my life. If we actually got the visuals on it, I think every American would be horrified to find out what's going on at the border. We have children being trafficked that are being separated from their parents. We have drugs that are pouring across the border, weapons that are pouring across the border, all being facilitated by a lot of non-for-profits, NGOs, non-governmental organizations. So all of this is being funded by our taxpayer dollars. The crime issue, and I guess I'm going out of order here, and I apologize for that.
It's all tied together, to be honest with you. So
Oh,
there
it
is
is.
real order, right?
Absolutely, it is. The crime issue, it boggles my mind because it is something that I really didn't see coming. We have allowed our elections to be stolen for quite some time. This has been a gradual process that really wasn't in our mind's eye. We couldn't really see it until 2020. But slowly but surely, we have been taken over in our court system. So our district attorneys have been purchased by George Soros, who does not want good things for the United States. And our judges really throughout the country have been bought and paid for, such that they are putting people out on personal recognizance bonds. So our poor police officers are so demoralized at this point. They make arrests. They'll spend all day doing the paperwork for an arrest. And they see that same criminal out on the court, out of jail and committing the same crime the very next day. And so it's chaos, and it is intentional chaos. In terms of the economy, it is all tied in together. The government is spending more money than we have ever spent. We bring in $4 trillion a year. That's what we get from our tax revenue. We're borrowing another $4, and we're paying 1.2 trillion in debt service, essentially paying the interest on the money that we're borrowing. And we're borrowing another $1 trillion every quarter. This is not sustainable. You and I just sitting here, we owe another $260,000 a piece in this national debt, which is, it's just a snowball effect that is going to be absolutely catastrophic for our kids. We're looking at $100 trillion in the next, 10 years, essentially. This, at the rate that we're going, it is a catastrophe. We have got to stop the government spending. And so when you look at what can be accounted for, we've only got perhaps $3.7 trillion that we can actually tie down and say, this is what we spent. Where is the other money? It's Black Ops. We can't track that money. And for me, I have to say that the cost of rolling out communism must be about $4 trillion a year. Because
seems the way, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. That is the only, assumption that we can make. Because our schools are infiltrated. Our children are being indoctrinated. They're not being educated.
Right.
They are experiencing pornography in the schools. There is this entire transgender agenda that in Texas, we are trying to put a stop to with all kinds of legislation. But without a judicial system, we've got plenty of laws, but we don't have anybody that's going to make sure that they're followed. And so this indoctrination hasn't stopped. We've got pediatricians, unfortunately, that are indoctrinated. I had a pediatrician who claims to be an independent tell me that they have now discovered that the frontal lobe of a child is fully formed by the age of 14, which is 100% false. It's 25. We know that. Children
I remember
cannot
being 14. I remember being 14, and I can't. I'll speak for myself. I was not fully developed at 14. I had a lot of
No.
misunderstandings that age.
But see, the AMA, or so the American Medical Association, will put a memo out to everyone. Listen, we've got this study, and of course they pay for the study to say what they want the study to say. And so it is this indoctrination of even our medical establishment to go along with this agenda, right? And this transgender agenda, which really ends our species. It really does. I mean, we're already dealing. I'm sorry.
Makes it very strange along the way. It's confusion at its worst.
It is. It is. And so, yeah, I had a conversation with somebody yesterday. Had a friend who went through with a double mastectomy as an adult, wanting to transition into a man, and now she's miserable. Imagine that. Imagine that.
Right.
This is a grown adult. How are these children going to be feeling? And there are plenty of studies out there. I mean, it increases the likelihood of suicide. It increases the likelihood of suicide. Not only that, but they're not going to be able to procreate, which means, no babies, no grandbabies, and they're allowing these decisions to be made when they're a teenager and sometimes younger. I watched somebody being injected with, it was a 5-year or 11-year-old, I'm sorry, who the mother had started to dress the boy like a girl, and so at age 11 started this child on puberty blockers. So the mother was, indoctrinating the child. I can't believe what has happened to society. And so we got to do everything that we can to get it back. We can't stop fighting. We've got to fight tooth and nail. I'm not taking any lobbyist money. I'm not taking any special interest money from Big Pharma or any other kind of lobbying agency, because that's what happens. We look at Congress and they're bought and paid for. They're not working for their constituents anymore. So I'll be going back to my apartment by myself. So feel free to call me because I'm going to be very lonely. No dinners, no cocktails, no parties in Washington, D.C., because the first thing that happens is you get yourself into a position that they will use against you. And so it will be very dangerous waters treading in D.C., but I will keep my nose clean and make sure that I'm working for my constituents.
Well, I think you've got your head on your shoulders. You've got the right outlook. But I want to remind the voters, you've already gotten past the primary. You had a primary and you're now in a runoff race, correct?
So this is the runoff for the primary in essence, if that makes sense. There were 4 candidates going into the primary, and myself and my opponent are now in a runoff. My opponent did a pay to play, if you know what that is. It's a magazine where he paid, I believe, $10,000 to have an ad put in this magazine, but at the same time, it buys you the endorsement that says, it's a slate of candidates. And it says, we guarantee that these are the most conservative and most qualified candidates, even though they don't talk to any of the other candidates. They just accept the money, and out goes this publication that says, this is your voter guide. And on election day, myself and my volunteers were trying to yank this thing out of people's hands. And folks are saying, I've always voted with this. And my mind was blown. I'm like, are you kidding? That, every single person in there has paid thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for that endorsement. And none of my endorsements, I have plenty of endorsements, solid endorsements like yours, that I won't pay for an endorsement. I wouldn't even, if somebody gave me an endorsement and expected me to pay for it, that's not an endorsement. That's a pay to play. And so I don't operate that way. I'm a Christian, and I feel that if we do this the right way, God will bless us. And by blessing me, the nation is blessed. And that's what we need. We need God back. We need God back in the mix, back in the fold, back in government, back in our schools, and back in our hearts.
I fully agree with that. And if you have someone in your district trying to mislead the voters as to who's the most conservative or who they should vote for, that is absurdity. Paying for an endorsement, paying to play, as you put it, is contrary to voter integrity. And we're seeing not only problems on the left, but problems in I call it the uniparty right, those that are in it for themselves. So I want voters to have the access to the actual facts. I want the candidates to have platforms, and that's why we do these interviews. In addition to this interview, if someone wanted to find out more about your race, more about who you are as a person, where would they go?
So I'm on Twitter at Caroline Kane TX, and my last name is spelled with a K, so Kane, Caroline Kane TX. My website is Caroline Kane for Congress, and you can either use the number 4 or FOR. I own them both, and they go to the same place.
That's smart, by the way.
And I am on Facebook. It's not my favorite media, but I am on there, and it's Caroline Kane for Congress there. I have an Instagram, and I have a TikTok. I'm not on those platforms very often. I think the best place to really see what I'm all about is going to be Twitter. That's the public forum today. And if you want the truth, you need to be on Twitter. X.
We all do that, right? Well,
right.
I want all the voters in District 7 in Texas to go on and look up your candidates, vote your conscience, And if you feel so inclined, I want you to volunteer for Miss Kane. I want you to donate your time, and most importantly, get to the polls, and we need your vote. We need your vote for all America First candidates. Save our country for our children. Even if they want to rebel in the future, they've got to have a country to rebel against. So thank you very much for coming on the Vet Voice and stepping off the sidelines and having a true, sincere intent to get to DC and do what needs to be done.
Thank you so much, Jared. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.